So, how y'all doing? Zigmonger. Columbia River Knife and Tool, right? There's one thing they excel at, it's small fixed blades. There isn't too many companies out there that do small fixed blades and do them well, you know what I mean? And come out with a lot of different models. CRKT's got several out there on the market. I've only got 3 of them here. And they've got like 20 or 30 different neck models, you know what I mean? And they're all relatively good design. However, some of them excel over others. One of them is the more popular, is the Minimalist series. This one here being the Tonto Minimalist. I really like these ones just because of the amount of comfort you get with the amount of security, because it is very secure in my hand. You know what I mean? It really is locked in there just due to the aggressive design of it. It's not going anywhere. And you still have a good amount of working blade, right? The 5CR15 MOV could, the steel quality itself could be upped a little bit. But it works. It takes a decent edge. You can sharpen it up relatively easy. Not this one. I've actually had a harder time with the Rakote on this one, keeping it sharp. But the Karahawk here is also one of my favorites because you can just see how aggressive of a design this is. The jimping on the back of the spine is cut really, really well. Reminiscent of something like you see on a Spyderco. Sharp angles. It's done very well. It's in the correct position. It's on that little ramp. So when you actually hold this knife in your hand, it's very secure. You know what I mean? There's not a whole lot of motion for room, and I mean, like, you can see the amount of squeeze that I'm giving this thing, and it doesn't go anywhere. So the slashing capability behind this little thing is pretty. This is a mean ass little blade. It's not going to be the best direct slicer because the angle of that hawkbill is just too aggressive. But if you come, coming back at an angle, something like that, this is a very aggressive, very mean little knife. Excellent for cutting loose material. Hawkbills are overlooked, I think, as far as utility blades. People look at the hawkbill blade, karambit style blade, and they think, oh, that's only good for defense, only good for cutting, meat. And it's really not true. I mean, it as far as tip cutting goes, this is one of the best tip cutters. You know what I mean? Just the karambit style blade, because it hooks material, it holds it in there. Cutting open a box is easy with a hawkbill. So that's next Minimalist. This one's probably my favorite out of all of them, just because I like clip point blade designs, and this thing has an incredible amount of belly. I've seen this one a lot as a hunting knife. This one is actually relatively popular with hunters, and I think it's just due to that amount of belly and the fact that it's right there. You've got so much control over this knife because the blade is it's just right there, and it only comes out so far, you know what I mean? So you have an extreme amount of control and just intuitiveness with this. You know where that blade is, you know where it's going, you know what angle you're holding it at, just due to as aggressive of a design as it is. Again, you never have a misconception on your angle. So if you are skinning, if you're stripping, deer hide, something like that, you're not really going to lose your angle. You know what I mean? You're not going to mess up and put a hole in your leather, which is a really nice thing. For anything, any sort of purpose that really falls into. You know what I mean? Again, this is another 5CR15 MOV. Takes an edge decently well. You can see the sheath for these. They're all the Tonto sheath, which I think is kind of funny. This is just here because it's the only CRKT folding knife that I own. This is a CRKT M1613 SFG. And this is just a weird little beast. I'm going to do an actual review on this one, but strange knife. I got a request to do a review on the CRKT SPEW, actually. Well, the CRKT SPEW or the CRK versus the CRKT Obake. And honestly, the CRKT SPEW here, right, is a phenomenal knife for more defensive tasks, I think, because of the narrowness of the tip. It's again that 5CR15 MOV, and it's just a very aggressive little knife. The wound channel you're going to get from this, because it is a Wharncliffe, right? So with a Tonto, when you actually, or not with a Tonto, excuse me, with like a drop point, right? When you actually penetrate soft material, the belly is being forced downward by the spine of the blade, right? So you go in, and the belly is actually what's making that cut. And that's what leads to, a clip point giving an easier penetration, is because it's forcing onto the actual belly, right? And if you've got a curve, therethere's less material, less contact, less pressure, less pressure points, so you're going to be cutting more material easier. You're going to sail through, you're going to penetrate into material easier, right? Just leave it out. This Wharncliffe here is going to stick into material really easy for the first little bit, right? But the moment you get actually into something and that blade starts to get forced sideways, it's a push cut, because it's a flat edge surface, right? All of that force is being pushed sideways, and it's push cutting into material as you go forward, right? So Wharncliffe actually requires a little bit more energy to actually make the penetration, to actually make that thrust. But once it's done, once the actual wound cavity is there, it's a more aggressive and just deadlier wound cavity with something like this. However, that positive on the self-defense aspect goes. This one is on the other side of it, right? This isn't going to have nearly as aggressive of a wound channel. It's not going to be nearly as big. It's not going to be, it's going to be a little bit longer, fractionally longer, but it's not going to be nearly as big. What this one delivers is the ease of penetration. That Tonto, you can see it's a flat back, so there is no motion, there is no forcing side to side of this blade. Upon penetration, it's going to penetrate straight, and it's going to go in straight, because it doesn't need to move at all, which makes the actual amount of energy, the amount of force required to get this into material much lighter than the Wharncliffe here, right? So it's easier to penetrate with this, but this is going to give a more aggressive wound channel. And if you go to the other side of it, you're just talking about utility, cutting open boxes and things like that. This is just going to excel. The Obake is going to take that one, because it's got more belly, there's more blade, and it's much more robust. The thickness on the Obake here is 0.13 inches. The thickness on the SPEW is 0.1 inches. And it's AUS-8, right? AUS-8 is a tougher steel than the 5CR13. It's going to hold a little bit of a better edge than the 5CR15 MOV, excuse me. And so it is a little bit better choice for utility, just carrying it around, cutting open boxes, things like that. The gradual sweep here in the belly that you do have is going to make it a lot easier. You can put your blade down, and touch, and you can see my belly is actually going to be making that cutting material, whether I'm push cutting or draw cutting. It's going to be the belly making that contact. With something like a Wharncliffe, even as good of a knife design as this is, because that edge, you can see that edge isn't far out. They've got it set further out in front of my finger, right? So I can almost get full contact with the blade when I cut down like that, but I still can't. You see that? All of that penetration, all of that cutting, if I were to cut material, is going to be done with the tip. All of that touch, all of that contact is right there up front, right? I don't want to cut my mat, but so as far as just time, amount of times that you can use this knife to cut open material, your tip on this is going to go dull a lot faster than the belly, and the entire belly is going to go dull on this. Plus the fact that it's the 8CR13. It's either 8CR13 or AUS-8. I'm not sure. They're about equivalent. And so it's going to hold a little bit of an edge, and it's going to give you more ability for use as far as length on the edge. But the CRKT SPEW takes it in grip as well. This knife is it's very small, but it's very ergonomic. It feels very good in my hand. That finger choil there, with as much of a guard, comes out in front of that finger choil there. You can see it comes out almost to a 90-degree angle to the spine, right? Which gives just an excellent stopping ability for, you know, penetration, any piercing and penetration. As well, the jimping on the back of the spine here is placed very well. It's done very good. It's not quite as good as on the Carahawk, but it's still definitely respectable. And so the stopping ability, you know, the safety goes to the SPEW, because even if you hit hard material, if you hit something hard enough to snap that tip off, you're still never going to slip up onto the blade, because it's just, there's almost no risk of that. You know what I mean? It is a very secure grip as far as penetrating goes. Retracting motion maybe a little bit slicker. There's really nothing to hold your hand on as far as, you know, pulling it out of material. That's why I've got a lanyard on here. But the SPEW is going to give a excellent grip as long as you are squeezing very, very hard. If you loosen your grip at all on this, and when upon penetration, you can imagine there's no guard. My hand's just going to slip right up over the blade. But if you are squeezing, if you do have a good purchase on this cord wrap is done really very well. I mean, for like, you know, a sub $50 knife, $50 knife, maybe a little bit more, this cord wrap is impressive. It's done very, very tight. It's not coated in any sort of resin, I don't think, but it's still just wrapped very well. They did an excellent job finishing that. And so it does give a very secure purchase. All the ridges, all of the little bumps, you know what I mean? It does have a great amount of grip, only if you're squeezing really, really hard. The moment you say I loosen my hand up in there, I can move this knife. If I squeeze it, it's solid. It's not going anywhere. And so this knife may require, you know, the Obake may require a little bit more intensive training as far as thought process going into a defensive task, but I think it's going to do a little bit better than the SPEW. But at the same time, the SPEW definitely does have its benefits. You know what I mean? And one of them being, I mean, it's just pretty. Look at that G10. I love that G10. It is really good looking. But I wouldn't want this knife. I would be a little bit more apprehensive about going with the SPEW just because of the delicateness of that tip if it's a defensive knife, right? If it's going to be for, you know, I mean, just for utility use, the SPEW is going to be, you know, it's going to do decently well. You really don't have to worry about it. But with as thin as that tip is, and being the fact that this is going to excel best at a stabber, right? Because you're not going to be able to do a very good slash cut with this. A Wharncliffe is a good slash cutter, but the amount of grip that you have, you can see it's not even touching the back of my palm here. It's all in my fingers, so it's not going to be the best slasher, right? And if you break that tip off, you don't have penetration capability with this knife. You can imagine. You break that tip off, it's just like a little chisel. You're not going to be able to stab with it. So all you've got is slashing, and this isn't the best slasher out there. So for a defensive purpose, I would definitely go with the Obake, just because of, you know, the thickness of the actual tip, how stout this blade is. It's just it's a great little defensive option. You know what I mean? And for utility EDC, honestly, it just goes with personal preference, which one you like the best, because they're all going to perform decently well. Yeah, CRKT lineup. It's a SPEW, the Obake, and the Minimalist. The Minimalist is a fantastic name, however, it does not fit the knife at all. A Minimalist wouldn't have jimping. It wouldn't be all of this crazy design here. It would just be like a stick with a blade similar to this. That would be a true Minimalist. So, great name, but I mean, that is an intricate ass knife to be called a Minimalist. Y'all have a good one.